The movie begins with a 10-year-old girl named Natascha. That morning, she had just woken up and realized that she had overslept to go to school. The night before, she met up with her father and hung out at a bar with his friends. When her mother asked about it, Natascha lied and said she didn't go to the bar. However, her mother didn't just believe her. As a result, the mother decided to forbid Natascha from seeing her father again. From here, it appears that Natascha's parents have divorced. Annoyed at being forbidden to see her father, Natascha gets angry, which makes her mother even more upset. In her anger, the mother finally slapped Natascha. This annoyed Natascha, so she immediately left for school without wanting to be escorted by her mother. On the way, Natascha looks sad when remembering the slapping incident that just happened. However, something unwanted happened. While passing a road near her school, a man suddenly pulled her by force and put her in a car. After successfully entering Natascha, the man immediately drove his car and left. The man took Natascha to his house. In an unconscious state, Natascha was put into a small room located in the basement. It was clear that the man had prepared the room carefully, and every corner was calculated in detail. When Natascha woke up, she looked confused and scared, not knowing where she was. Panicked, she immediately tried to open the door and shouted for help. Unfortunately, all her efforts were in vain. No one heard her screams and the door remained firmly locked without the slightest chance of escape. Shortly after, the man returned with a mattress and a plate of food. Natascha was terrified to see a stranger she didn't know at all. However, being a 10-year-old child, she innocently said, "I just want to go home." Of course, the man ignored her request. He remained silent, put down the mattress and food in the room, and stared at Natascha expressionlessly before leaving the little girl in fear and confusion. It was discovered that the man's name was Wolfgang. He was seen relaxing while drinking a glass of milk, then found a book of fairy tales on his bookshelf. Without saying much, he then read a fairy tale to Natascha. When he finished reading Natascha's fairy tale, Wolfgang left her alone in the room. Meanwhile, news about Natascha's disappearance became headlines in many newspapers and was reported on various TV channels. The next day, Wolfgang's mother came to visit his house. While watching the news about Natascha's disappearance on television, the mother said to Wolfgang, "The kidnapper must be crazy." Unbeknownst to the mother, this sentence reflected the very different reality that her son was the perpetrator of this barbaric act. The following day, the man again came to Natascha's isolation room and told her to rinse her hair. However, on that occasion, Natascha also asked Wolfgang to send a letter to her mother. She hoped the letter would make her mother not worry about her condition. However, Wolfgang responded coldly to the request, saying it was all pointless. "Your mother doesn't care anymore," Wolfgang said, "she won't even pay the ransom fee." With that, Wolfgang left, tightly closing all entrances to the isolation room, which he had designed to be inaccessible to anyone, as if building a tight security system. The next day, while Wolfgang was relaxing over coffee with his mother and grandmother, two policemen suddenly came to his house. The police were investigating Natascha's disappearance and began to suspect Wolfgang. However, with a calm and intelligent attitude, Wolfgang convinced the two police officers that nothing was suspicious. The police were unable to find any evidence. Finally, the two policemen left without searching Wolfgang's house first, as if they did not find enough reason to continue the investigation further.
Bye. Bye.
Wolfgang, this time, began to think about saving time and not going back and forth to the isolation room. To that end, he installed a communication device in Natascha's room that was connected directly to the top. This way, Wolfgang could communicate with Natascha directly without going to the isolation room every time. Long story short, we move to day 183. Natascha, who is now lonely in the small room, adapts. She tries to make imaginary friends to cope with the saturation and find ways to escape. One of her attempts was to smear her hand with food cream, pretending it hurt and needed to be taken to the doctor. However, Wolfgang wasn't stupid. He quickly checked and found out that it was just Natascha's trick. The escape attempt was uncovered. As punishment, Wolfgang decided not to give Natascha food. Not only that, he also tortured Natascha further before finally leaving her alone and hungry, further worsening her condition. Long story short, 4 years had passed, and Natascha was still in the same room. However, the room now contained many items, making it look more comfortable despite its isolation. One day, On the 1695th day, Natascha had her first period. Since there was no bathroom in the room, Wolfgang allowed Natascha to go to the bathroom upstairs. Before that, however, he threatened sternly, warning Natascha not to try to escape. He explained that every door and window in the house was booby-trapped to prevent escape. After many years, Natascha saw the light of day for the first time. She looked brooding and confused, as if it was difficult to understand what was happening. Wolfgang immediately took Natascha to the bathroom to clean her body, but he kept an eye on her, ensuring she didn't do anything that could harm her. Afterward, Wolfgang's grandmother visited the house. While talking to Wolfgang, she asked, "Do you have a girlfriend yet?" Because Wolfgang's sweater showed a woman's blonde hair. Wolfgang replied, "I don't know whose hair it is." After his grandmother had gone home, Wolfgang immediately went to see Natascha, who was relaxing in her room. Without saying much, he immediately cut Natascha's hair to erase any trace that could remind her of her past or identity. On the 1837th day of Christmas, Natascha's mother and grandmother looked sad. The Christmas moment reminded them of the child who had disappeared for years. Natascha's mother could only cry, not knowing what else to do or where else to look for the baby who had vanished without a trace. Her feelings of loss and confusion deepened as the years passed by. Entering day 2029, Wolfgang has now entrusted Natascha with preparing meals. Although she still receives harsh treatment, their relationship has changed. Natascha has also started being invited to shop for home needs. Natascha had a good chance to escape when they were at the shopping center. However, doubts and fears began to creep up on her. Ultimately, her fear and confusion overcame her, and Natascha decided not to run away, choosing to stay by Wolfgang's side despite the opportunity. After returning home, Natascha began to feel regret over her decision to stay. These feelings made her angry with herself. As night fell, Natascha asked Wolfgang, "Why did you choose me to be kidnapped?" Only then was Wolfgang's motive for kidnapping Natascha revealed. Wolfgang explained that the abduction started when he was shopping at Natascha's mother's shop. There, Wolfgang saw Natascha smiling at him. The smile stayed in his mind, and he began to be mesmerized by the 10-year-old girl. Wolfgang liked Natascha's sweet smile, which was the starting point of his strange feelings. From there, Wolfgang began to plan the kidnapping very carefully. He designed the confinement room, watched Natascha's movements, and even waited for the right moment to kidnap her. Everything about this kidnapping had indeed been prepared by Wolfgang long before, with a completely different purpose from what appeared on the surface. Hearing the story in solitude, Natascha felt she could no longer cope with Wolfgang's madness. A feeling of hopelessness overcame her, and she began to get depressed. In deep pain, Natascha attempted to end her life by burning the paper in her room. A puff of smoke began to fill the room, but soon, she realized what she was doing and quickly put out the fire, aborting her suicide attempt. However, in her confusion, Natascha realized that the smell of the smoke could make Wolfgang furious. In a panic, she quickly sprayed some deodorizer to get rid of the pungent smoke smell. But shortly after, Wolfgang came in and immediately smelled the smoke still in the room. Wolfgang was, of course, furious because he knew Natascha had tried to kill herself. On the 2847th day, it snowed heavily. Wolfgang took Natascha skiing, but when Natascha asked permission to go to the restroom, Wolfgang sensed something was wrong. His suspicions grew more substantial, so he immediately took her home. Arriving home, Natascha again receives punishment from Wolfgang for trying to escape. Wolfgang planned to sell his car a few weeks later because he had run out of money. He felt that Natascha was safe enough and took Natascha to rewash the vehicle. While cleaning the car, Natascha noticed the fence was slightly open. Although she was confused because Wolfgang was also there, the opportunity suddenly arose when Wolfgang's phone rang. Due to the loud sound of the vacuum cleaner, Wolfgang had to go inside the house to pick up the phone. Seeing that, Natascha felt that this was the right moment. With renewed confidence, she ran quickly and finally arrived at an old lady's house. Natascha immediately asked the grandmother to call the police. Shortly after, the police arrived, and Natascha anxiously explained who she was, afraid that Wolfgang would come and kill everyone around. The suspense wasn't over, as Natascha had to be taken to the police station for further investigation. However, luck was on her side. On that day, the police acted quickly and cooperatively. Eventually, they managed to reunite Natascha with her mother. On the other hand, Wolfgang, who learned that Natascha had run away, decided to commit suicide, ending his dark story. And so the movie ends.